So, Ben Shapiro, hold your laughter, I know. Ben Shapiro is very mad that the publishing company behind Dr. Seuss's books, don't know who publishes them, pretty irrelevant to this discussion. Either way, it's a private company that publishes Dr. Seuss's books. 5 of these books were very poorly selling, and on top of that, had some pretty racially insensitive depictions of individuals of different races. Let's give you some examples. Here's one. A depiction of a Chinese man, stereotypical, wearing one of those hats, eating rice with chopsticks on the go in like one of those, I don't even know what the shirt thing's called. Whatever. And I know some of you are thinking, I don't know. Let's take a look at some of these other ones. This is one where it's depicting African individuals, and they have pot bellies. They're barefoot in grass skirts with giant nose rings and their hair up in kind of a messy top bun with ringlets sort of on their arms, okay? This is not just a little, like, I don't know, it's of its time. This is like minstrel showy bullshit, right? This is not even close to acceptable in 2021. And there were some other ones about, like, you know, Middle Eastern type places. You get it. 5 books. The books were, let me take a look. If I Ran the Zoo, I think I saw it on Mulberry Street. McGilligan's Pool, On Beyond Zebra, and Scrambled Eggs Super. 5 Dr. Seuss books that I guarantee 90% of the audience has never heard of. Maybe you've heard of If I Ran the Zoo and Mulberry Street. The other ones, I almost guarantee you've never heard of. This was not driven, by the way, by any sort of Twitter hashtag. This was not driven by outraged people being like, you must ban these books. Because again, these are books no one has heard of in like 40 years. No one knows these books. But they're poorly selling, and on top of that, they have pretty racially insensitive depictions. By the way, even Dr. Seuss himself admitted that he was ashamed of certain depictions of individuals that he had drawn in the past. Let's look. Dr. Seuss racist drawings. So Dr. Seuss, of course, was doing illustrations even before his own books. He would do political comics and other material that was, you know, like this. This is another depiction of a black individual that's minstrel show as F. It is unacceptable, right? By today's standards, we all understand this is not okay. Here's another one. This is one of the books I think that got removed because of its depiction of these Asian individuals, right? Not okay. This is from something else. Dr. Seuss, in his lifetime, while he was alive, he also did some World War II comics that were, much like a lot of World War II propaganda, pretty racist against Japanese individuals. Anyway, within his own lifetime, Dr. Seuss expressed regret over these depictions. He said, hey, I screwed up. These weren't okay, and I've learned to not do that anymore. And that's wonderful. Outside of that, Dr. Seuss is sort of a cool, how do I put this? Dr. Seuss is a complicated individual like everyone is. Dr. Seuss wrote a lot of really great things. He had some wonderful, like comics, political comics, as well as Dr. Seuss books later in life that were anti-fascist in nature, right? Some more explicitly than others. Yertle the Turtle is supposed to be like a fascist allegory and how fascism ends badly for everyone. He wrote a lot of stuff about not being racist. He wrote Horton Hears a Who in part in response to like some of the things he had written before, some of the things he had drawn before. So Dr. Seuss did end up learning his lesson, but nonetheless, I think if Dr. Seuss was alive today, he would understand them deciding not to publish those anymore. And in fact, if he was alive today, he would probably be like, you want me to re-illustrate those pages? I can probably do that. The Sneetches. The Sneetches is another really good anti-racism and how, probably unintentionally, but it's a good allegory as to how capitalistic intent can try and push divisiveness amongst people for their own profit. So that's good. He's done a lot of great work. I love Dr. Seuss books. I grew up with them. I had a set of them growing up. Not all of them, but many of them, the ones you're thinking of. Cat in the Hat, Green Eggs and Ham, The Grinch, you know, a bunch of them. I probably had about 10 to 15 Dr. Seuss books. So don't be thinking I'm someone who hates Dr. Seuss for some reason. I don't. I love Dr. Seuss. Oh, the Places You'll Go is my favorite one, although that's cliche. I love Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss, though, complicated person. For instance, apparently, Dr. Seuss cheated on his wife while she had cancer, which caused her to kill herself. So we can look at Dr. Seuss as a complete person and say, well, he certainly did some bad things in terms of his depictions of different races. He certainly did some good things in terms of some of his books later in life that had to do with not being racist, the dangers of fascism, stuff like that. And we can also say, cheated on his wife and she killed herself. So, oh, and then he ended up being with the woman that he cheated on his wife with. They stayed together. So, Dr. Seuss is not this, like, bastion of perfect everythingness. That being said, read your kids Green Eggs and Ham. Read your kids The Cat in the Hat. Read your kids The Sneetches. Read your kids The Lorax. These are wonderful pieces of children's fiction. They're creative. The art is wonderful. And most importantly, not racist. Quite the opposite in many of the cases for a lot of his work. Anyway, circling back to the beginning. Like I said, the publisher behind the Dr. Seuss books currently has decided to stop publishing 5 of the books, some of which had the depictions that we showed earlier. The right's pissed off about this. They're blaming cancel culture. They're saying it's the left's fault. Again, even though there was no mass movement to have this happen, this was a decision made by a private publisher about their own intellectual property. So let's see how Ben's reacting to this. Gonna guess not well.
Everybody is on the cancellation block. And if you don't cancel, the best path to joining the woke, by the way, is to cancel yourself preemptively. And this is precisely what is happening to Dr. Seuss. So, Dr. Seuss's books are classics of children's literature. He's the greatest children's author for kids who are under the age of 7 of all time. It is not close. Let
me take a look. I'm not necessarily disagreeing. I just don't know a ton of children's authors under 7. He's probably the most prolific, if I had to guess, in terms of, like, the number of really, really great children's books that he put out. Roald Dahl is probably a step up. Roald Dahl's really good. I like a lot of the Roald Dahl books. The, BFG and Matilda and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and the sequel to that, The Great Glass Elevator. Those are good, but sure. Okay. I would see Dr. Seuss as 7 and below. I don't know a ton of, like, children's book authors, though. But I could agree with that statement.
Dr. Seuss books to my kids pretty much every day. Okay, but according to a...
Right on, and that's great. I'm glad your kids are getting some anti-fascist messaging somewhere, Ben.
Virginia school district, Dr. Seuss's birthday can no longer be touted on Read Across America Day because a study said the author's work is, quote, filled with Orientalism, anti-blackness, and white supremacy. Now, I grew up reading Dr. Seuss books. You grew up reading Dr. Seuss books.
See, I don't know if I even agree with that. Like, I'm fine with the private company. And again, this is within the framework we're working in. I'm not a big fan of how capitalism currently functions and how it makes our society work. Or not work, in many cases. But we do live under that system, and I think the rules should be fair within that system as much as they can be for what the system is. They're a private company. If they want to, like, not publish these books, good for them. That's great. I don't really care. choosing not to celebrate Dr. Seuss on the whole for this, that's your choice. That's fine. I can't determine what this school district does or whatever. But I think it's losing a teaching moment, maybe. I don't know. I think it's fair to teach kids, like, hey, Dr. Seuss, amazing children's author. You love Dr. Seuss, right? Well, here's the thing. Dr. Seuss did some things that weren't so great. Here are some things that Dr. Seuss did that were like, although maybe this is something you should teach to older kids than like 7, maybe 10 to 12 would be a better age, but like, I think it's a fair point to be like, hey, Dr. Seuss, great children's author, but also product of his time in many ways. Here are things that we've grown past as a culture.
Everybody grew up reading Dr. Seuss books. Did it make you more racist to read a Dr. Seuss book? Did it ever even occur to you that race was an element of Dr. Seuss books until I just said this 1 second ago?
I mean, that's kind of the issue, is that things that are in our pop culture are just sort of there and we don't realize how they're affecting us until they already do. You don't necessarily see the subtext of certain things and understand the issue with them initially.
Of course not. Because no one is actually outraged about this. There are no human beings who read Dr. Seuss books and are actually angry at them.
Angry? No. If I had kids and I was reading them the Dr. Seuss book and I saw some of those illustrations, I'd be like, probably not gonna read this to my kid again. Just because it's pretty fucking yikes. It is. There's nothing wrong with admitting that there are problematic elements in media you enjoy. No one is telling you, Ben, that you cannot read your kid Dr. Seuss. Read your kid Dr. Seuss. But I would bet Ben Shapiro $10,000 that not once has he ever read his kids one of the 5 Dr. Seuss books that have been depublished or they're not going to be published anymore. Because they're like their least popular Dr. Seuss books. No one reads these to their children. You're getting mad that something is not going to be published anymore that you didn't care about until you were told, hey, we're not going to publish this anymore. Because it's not about the actual content of the books. It's not about how you actually felt about the books previously. It's about your perceived culture war and feeling that you need to do whatever the opposite of what you perceive liberals or people on the left to be doing. So you gotta get mad and you gotta find the racist Dr. Seuss books just to own the libs. It's the most childish shit.
All of this is just about signaling. It is about setting new standards, hoops for people to jump through. And if
oh no, setting new standards. Like imagine, Imagine like Ben Shapiro growing up in the past or something. And like, let's say, I don't know, dolls like this, right? Or something that's more contemporary to the past, because I think I've actually read about these, that they still exist in some places. But like, let's say this kind of thing was still selling in America today, right? And they started saying, hey, we shouldn't be selling these. They're pretty racially insensitive, right? Not cool. I can imagine Ben Shapiro being like, what, when you see this, do you think about race? I don't think about race. This is just a depiction. It's whatever. Like, Ben, of course you don't. That's the entire problem. That's the problem, Ben.
if you ask for any sort of context that provides whether the book is racist, whether it is racist to read If I Ran the Zoo, because there are people of Asiatic appearance in the book If I Ran the Zoo. If you even ask even the question is racist. If you say, okay, well, he drew that in 1940, and let's just say that it was insensitive in 1940.
It's insensitive now. We live in 2021. It was also insensitive back then, but they didn't know that.
Has any child read this in the last 20, 30, 40 years? And
probably not at all, which is why it doesn't really matter that they're not going to be publishing it anymore.
Come away with a bad impression of people from Japan?
I think in that it was Chinese, not Japanese. But I think that was the one with the person with chopsticks. Ben, it's not about it being like a racist diatribe. No one is claiming you're going to come out of like we If I Owned the Zoo or one of these other books thinking bad things implicitly about these groups, about people in these groups. The issue is that it's creating certain stereotypical images in your mind about what this is. So even if you don't realize it, our sort of thoughts and stereotypes that we view other groups as do begin in childhood. So if the depictions of, like, people from Asia, whether it's Japan or China or wherever, are informed by stuff like this, then you get a pretty backwards image. You think, oh, China, chopsticks, buck teeth, her, you know? Like Mickey Rooney in Breakfast at Tiffany's. That becomes your mental image of Asian individuals, and that's not good. That's not good. So yeah, that's part of the reason that they decided to stop publishing these books, but I would imagine the bigger reason is they don't sell very well.
Because they read a Dr. Seuss book? To ask that question is to be the problem, because now you are asking for evidence of a claim that is by nature a claim that is rooted solely in feelings. So how did the Dr. Seuss Foundation respond to this? Not by defending their guy. Of course not. Instead, the official organization that controls the legacy of Dr. Seuss said it will no longer sell 6 of the author's children's books.
It was 6, not 5. I apologize.
Of racist and insensitive depictions, including his very first major book, and to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street. I can't even remember what is supposed to be racist, and to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street.
Sure. Let's look. This person even says, and I talked about this earlier, I don't remember if it was during this segment or during the initial start of the stream, but Dr. Seuss himself censored his work. In a reprint of Mulberry Street, a character referred to as a Chinaman, depicted with yellow skin, was changed to a Chinese man and the offensive color removed. A political progressive, he would certainly support updating his works. I don't disagree about that. If they wanted to change the image, I think that would also be fine. It was this one. This was the depiction of a Chinese man, according to the book, in Mulberry Street. Again, this has already been softened. The initial publishing, he was colored in yellow, and it was called, quote, Chinaman, which is, I don't know, who said the bit? I think it was John Mulaney who said that that's like the laziest racial slur. I tend to agree. Anyway, so they're not going to publish this book anymore because of this shit. Some of the other books had, like I said, stuff like this. We already looked at a bunch of the images. Here's the change, by the way. Here's what it looked like initially. Actually, this is the second edition. It was initially, quote, Chinaman. I'm just quoting it. And then it was changed to a Chinese boy, but the color remained. And then in the most recent revision, it's a Chinese man, and they removed the color. So it's not literal yellow face. So that's the answer, Ben.
If I ran the zoo and McGilligan's Pool, by the way, I own all of them. You should buy them today. They're great for your kids.
I personally bought the store out of Mr. Potato Heads. I have personally sculpted 74 potato penises for the potato heads. We need to ensure that our children know that potatoes, anthropomorphized as human beings, called Mr. Potato Head, have penis and, of course, the balls. So, go to your store and buy on the sorry. On the Daily Wire website, buy our custom-made Mr. Potato penises. Great for kids, birthday presents, Easter gifts. Give the gift of a potato penis today.
The notion that that he perpetuated Jewish stereotypes as financially stingy, and that all of this appears in his books. The study, published in 2019, examined 50 books by Dr. Seuss, found 43 out of the 45 characters of color have, quote, characteristics aligning with the definition of Orientalism. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Ben, define Orientalism to demonstrate that you know what they're even talking about. Please.
It's just, it's all insanity, but, again, to call for an end to the insanity is to excise yourself from the community of the new ruling class. And that is what all of this is about in the end.
The new ruling class. The Dr. Seuss Foundation. The new ruling class! One day we'll all have to speak in rhyme. I don't know how we'll find the time if we don't do what they say. In a guillotine I'll have to lay. Yeah, I'm no Theodore Geisel, sorry.
There's only one way to fight back against people who have
They'll put us all away. Damn, that's so much better. Fuck.
declared themselves to be at the top of the ruling class, and that's to say, you don't get to rule us. End of story. We ignore you, you're stupid, and we're not paying attention to any of this nonsense ever, ever again.
Okay. They're still not going to publish the book. They're a private company. What do you expect to do about it? Are you going to start a bootleg printing press, and you're going to start breaking copyright law? If you want to go pirate these books, they probably exist online somewhere. I don't care. I don't care.
But here's the thing. The Biden administration has bought into this stuff hook, line, and sinker. So here's the thing.
The Biden administration has taken away my Dr. Seuss book.
Biden administration, being members of the new ruling class, and Joe Biden being an old, white, corrupt politician, has decided that he speaks the vocabulary too. And it's very important that he speak the vocabulary. Because what the left has basically done is they've decided that by banding together identity politics and socialistic thinking, they can craft enough of a working majority to cram through their actual political agenda.
Oh, does he understand political ally making now? Does he understand that by taking, like, people's problems into consideration and by working together with others with similar goals that people can succeed? Cool.
Right? And to go back to the original thesis of today's show, it's all about politics. It is all about power and getting things done.
Which is why I'm taking 9 minutes out of the show to talk about Dr. Seuss. Last time I read the Lorax, I loved it. It's a wonderful story. If you haven't read the Lorax, just hypothetically, let's say you were go and read the Lorax. It is a wonderful tale about an entrepreneur taking advantage of an underutilized resource. A hippie in a mustache climbs out of a tree, and I swear to God, he looks exactly like he looks exactly like Bernie Sanders. God damn it. I gotta stop making myself laugh. It ruins my bits. He looks exactly like Bernie Sanders, and I swear to God, he flies into the air. This book is genius. Dr. Seuss, thank you for teaching our children how good capitalism is and how the environment is for us to utilize.
It's about the authoritarian cramdown of certain policies. Basically, there are a bunch of people who don't really buy into the vocabulary, who have decided they're going to make common cause with people who do buy into the vocabulary, and a bunch of people who actually believe in the inequity is inequality argument, who have decided that they will make common cause with the socialistic wing of the Democratic Party in order to cobble together a new coalition of the ascendant. You can see this actually pretty well in Bernie Sanders. If you look back at Bernie Sanders' original presidential campaign in 2016, he didn't speak about race nearly at all. It was all about how all of the problems in our society can be laid at the root of the capitalistic system, and if you just get more socialist, it solves everything. Then, over the course of the next few years, something interesting happened to the Bernie Sanders campaign. He was told that it was not racially sensitive to speak only in terms of class. Now, Bernie Sanders is basically a commie, right? I mean, his perspective...
He's really not. I think it more came from the understanding that intersectionally class-based issues affect different people based on their racial identity differently. I also think it's probably a pragmatic political strategy considering that race is such a prolific issue in our day-to-day lives nowadays. I don't know if you could even be a politician in America and not discuss race in one way or another at this point. It's just impossible.
On life is rooted in Marxist fundamental lies about class conflict and how all of human life is driven by this class conflict.
As someone who was born wealthy, I can tell you I have never seen class conflict. When I went to my private school with my sister, Abigail, who is a wonderful singer, by the way, have you heard her sing Phantom of the Opera? It brought me to, well, not tears. I cannot produce tears. The doctors have said they do not understand what is going on. However, if I was capable of the human emotion of crying, I certainly would have cried at her rendition of Phantom of the Opera.
Everything he says is driven by that. And so, if you believe that everything at root is about class conflict, it's not at root about racial conflict, right? The black working man and the white working man have more in common than the white working man and the white rich man.
Sure, You can also recognize, though, that within that framework, there are differences between people because of their racial groups. Not intrinsically, not because of their race, but because of how society and others treat them because of the perceived race that they have. That's something that you can discuss. You can have more than one problem at once. We can have class conflicts and also recognize that these class conflicts affect different people differently because of their social situation that's informed by their race, because society, unfortunately, puts value on people's race for some reason or lack thereof. People get treated differently because of the color of their skin. It's messed up. It's disgusting. It's not good. And I think we all agree with that. It's bad. Everyone except for like John Doyle and Nick Fuentes agree that that's a bad thing. Even I think Ben Shapiro agrees that that's a bad thing. He just also doesn't understand that the problems that we have with the capitalistic system and how it's hurting working class people disproportionately affects certain groups of people because they're already dealing with disadvantage from birth because of the history we're all born from.
Or the black working man and the black rich man. It's about class, it's not about race. But Bernie Sanders was told that this was racially insensitive. And so he decided to make common cause with the woke and start pushing as many woke policies as he could get his hands on. And this was, writ small, what has happened with the Democratic Party writ large. This was the magic of Barack Obama, right? This is what Obama did as president. I know that we have this picture of Barack Obama as though Barack Obama was this wonderful unifying figure. That is a figure put forth by the media. It is a lie. Barack Obama of 2004 was not the same as Barack Obama circa 2010. In 2004, Barack Obama was saying there are no black Americans. There are no white Americans. We're all just Americans. There's no red America, no blue America, just America. By 2010, Barack Obama was breaking down Americans into their identity groups so that he could...
That was during a period of time... Oh, how do I put this? That was during... What do I want to call this period? Let's call it the... I don't see color period of American history. There's a part of American history where we wanted to pretend that racism was over and that everyone was equal and that no one was treated differently because of the color of their skin. So it became sort of almost a progressive idea, a meme almost, that I don't see color, I don't see race, we're all just Americans. Yes, it was born of a certain naivete. It was typically, but not always, perpetuated by either white people or more well-off non-white people. The reality, unfortunately, as we've discovered as time has gone on, is that's not true, and we still haven't, dealt with our deep-seated racial issues in this country. And it's messed up. And it's sad. And it's at this point why if you say things like, I don't see color, you're basically just saying, I don't see racism? Which is why that comes up a lot. Racism exists. I do not judge anyone based on the color of their skin. However, I also recognize that other people do, and our systems in this country are kind of set up in such a way as to disadvantage certain groups of people, and I understand that we're all coming from different backgrounds because of these things. That doesn't mean I'm judging individual people based on, the color of their skin at all. It's to understand the way these things affect society as a whole and individuals within it. That's fine. That's reasonable.
Specifically appeal to members of those identity groups to create a coalition. This is the reason why he actually shrank his number of votes between 2008 and 2012, but it was enough to get him by Mitt Romney. So the merger between identity politics and typical sort of Democratic Party politics has been ongoing, and Joe Biden is the culmination of that, which is how you end up with a machine politician like Joe Biden, and that's what he is. A sort of machine, typical, corrupt old white politician who's suddenly become the face and voice of the racial reparations movement, according to...
Sure, I don't even disagree. I can understand that. I'm sure Biden is riding a wave of how Democratic politicians and progressive politicians in general right now are trying to... is my donate command not working? Weird. There's a link below the stream to the Streamlabs page if you did want to donate. What was I saying? Oh, I'm sure Biden has sort of gotten on this rhetorical train of oh yeah, I'm gonna be woke, I'm gonna be, pay lip service to all these specific racial related issues, and he's probably not gonna do dick about it because he's career politician guy. I didn't want to vote for Biden. Unfortunately, he was running against a fascist, so here we are. Funny how that works.
One of Joe Biden's top advisors, he is going to start acting now to address reparations to Black Americans. Speaking to Axios on HBO in an interview set to air on Monday, White House senior advisor Cedric Richmond discussed efforts targeted to helping minority communities. Richmond said they're not waiting on Congress. He said, we don't want to wait on a study. We're going to start acting now. We have to start breaking down systemic racism and barriers that have held people of color back, and especially African Americans. We have to do that stuff now, right? That's the vocabulary. And we're going to specifically
It's also an accurate description of issues that people who aren't white in this country deal with.
appeal on the basis of race and suggest that all inequality is inequity. And Joe Biden has decided that equity is the byword of his administration. So, for example, he says that we are going to start talking about free college tuition to historically black colleges and universities. If you start talking about free community college in Title I and all these things, I think you're well on your way. Now, let's be real about this. If you're talking about free college, the reality is that the great imbalance in our society is the number of people going to college between people who are black and white. The number of people who are white going to college by percentage is significantly higher. The number of people going to college who are black. That's not because of lack of affirmative action programs or benefits programs or scholarship programs. All of
I would imagine a lot of that has to do with lack of opportunity because it's incredibly expensive to go to college, especially these days. On top of tuition, you end up having, if it's a college that's further away than your hometown, then you're going to have to deal with living expenses, dorm, meals, textbooks. Like, it's incredibly expensive to go to college, and some people aren't capable of getting the loans necessary, even if they want to do that and overextend themselves financially. Like, it's not good.
those exist.
Which is why I think we should just have free college for everybody, but whatever.
Plenty. Right? The real problem is the failure of lower education. The failure of the public school system.
I guess we shouldn't fund schools based on property taxes then. Weird how that works.
So what is this? It's a typical Democratic policy smuggled in under the guise of the vocabulary. It's a typical Democratic policy position that is now being smuggled in under the guise of doing racial justice. You call it reparations, and then you can push forward the idea that you are speaking the vocabulary, and you can build your coalition on the back of all of this.
I don't really give a shit how they do it. If they want to provide access to education, primary, secondary, whatever, to people, I hope they do it however they can, because Republicans have been playing dirty tricks and lying through their teeth for 50 fucking years, and I'm tired of it. So if the Democrats have to do what they need to do to get progressive reforms, I hope they do it, and I hope it makes Ben Shapiro almost cry.
And so this...
He's incapable of crying. It's probably something with the ducts. I don't know. Or his robot brain. Either one.
This is the new pitch. This is the Biden administration pitch. Use the word equity to cram down all of the typical Democratic policy proposals and claim that anybody who disagrees with you is a racist. Because here's the thing. Joe Biden can't claim that anybody who disagrees with him is a racist. It's bizarre. That dude is whiter than the back of this piece of paper I'm holding up right now. I mean, if in a whiteness competition, I come in a distant second to Joe Biden. It is not close. Joe Biden is a super white dude. And yet, because he's using the language of quote-unquote equity and the language of anti-racism to push forward typical policy proposals, the idea becomes now that it is white supremacy to oppose Joe Biden's policy positions, an old white politician, one of the whitest people in America.
Do you think that a progressive, policy that helps non-white people stops being progressive or helping non-white people because it's talked about by a white person? That's not how that works. And again, I don't even think Joe Biden's going to do much for, the black community in the United States, but that's not how that works.
And so that gives him enormous ability to push forward these positions while calling all of his opponents racist, which is, again, bizarre. Barack Obama could do it because he could just say people who hate me are racist. And while it was a lie, he could at least pretend it was true because obviously at least the factual basis of him being a black person was right. Joe Biden, not a black person, still making the same exact claims.
Okay, do you need to be a black person to talk about the material conditions that are differing between white people and black people in the United States? That's not how it works.
So when you merge the democratic coalitional ideal with the racial ideal, and all of it becomes about those systems of power.
I think Ben Shapiro just doesn't like coalition building because the right's really bad at it outside of coalescing people who want to suck big business's dick and evangelicals. That's the one thing that they got. No, actually, here are the groups. The Republican Party is based on people who have been brainwashed into believing that trickle-down economics is good and that they're just temporarily embarrassed rich people and that one day they'll be billionaires, so we can't raise taxes on billionaires. Outright, and this isn't the majority, but their politics have certainly seeped into the rest of them, outright white supremacists. What else? Actual big business people, rich people, shit like that. Evangelicals, and I don't know. I already said bigots and shit. Those are probably the big main four. That's the coalition that the Republican Party has built, and it's very limited, and that group of people is shrinking and shrinking every single day because of demographics changing in the country, as well as people, let's just say class consciousness raising, slowly but surely over time. I think he's mad that the left is doing a better job of coalition building. Certainly the Democratic establishment is shit in the bed, but grassroots groups and individuals who are progressives, I think have been doing a relatively good job messaging. There have been some missteps, but I think coalition building amongst people on the left has been going better than it has amongst the right for the last 15 years or so. The right got so desperate they ended up going for Trump and courting outright neo-Nazi fascist people. Didn't work out great for them in the long run, at least so far. I guess we'll have to see what happens in 22 and 24, but that's a story for another day.
Right? Not about facts, not about the success of the policies, about the systems of power. You can get away with nearly anything, and Joe Biden knows this. Facts don't care about your feelings, and it's a fact that The Ben Shapiro Show is the largest conservative podcast in the nation. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all of
I'm pretty sure Joe Rogan is bigger than you, but okay. And yes, Joe Rogan is pretty conservative, whether he wants to admit it or not. So that's Ben Shapiro. Bitching about a publishing company choosing not to publish books that they own because questionable racial content. It's fine. I don't really care. Dr. Seuss. I like Dr. Seuss. I like Dr. Seuss a lot. I think Dr. Seuss was a creative, intelligent man, but also a complicated one who made some questionable decisions and cheated on his wife, who had cancer. So, whatever. Read your kids' Green Eggs and Ham. It's a good book. And stop worrying about shit like this, because it really doesn't matter. People are fucking losing their homes and can't pay their rent. Are we really bitching about Dr. Seuss books, people? Jesus Christ, Ben. Moving on.